Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Corporate Services and Economic Growth Overview and Scrutiny Committee here on the 3rd of February 2025 in the Council Chamber. We'll be discussing the budget, among other things, so I've extended an invite to scrutiny members not on this committee to come, and I'm pleased to see some of them here, so welcome. We'll go to the agenda. So the first thing, membership update, just to welcome our new Vice Chair, Caroline, who's taken over from Liz, so give a warm welcome. Next, item 2, apologies for absence. Rebecca?
Apologies from Councillor Taylor.
Councillor Taylor. Any from the floor? No? Okay, thank you very much. The minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated on the agenda. Any comments? Are we happy to approve them? Agreed? Agreed. Okay. Disclosure of members' interests? No. Forward plan of cabinet decisions? Rebecca, anything to note? No. Okay, thank you. So, we'll go on to the first major report. This is the budget 2025-2026, medium-term financial plan. I don't think we've got Wojciech on the screen yet, have we? No. So, Richard, if you will do a little brief introduction, and then we'll go to Jan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, I think probably councillors have had this heavily socialised to the point where you'll be fed up of the budget, but this is your chance to bring it through a scrutiny process. We've done various sessions across all of the local area councils. We've had a meeting of all councillors where they could ask questions previously, and this is the final bit almost before we go into the budget. As you'll know, this is the second half of a 2-year budget that was agreed last time around in last February. The reason that we, despite having a 2-year budget, that we still have to set a budget, of course, is because every year the government changes the financial envelope that it provides to the council in terms of the local government settlement. There's been a few changes this time, especially with a new government in Westminster, and so this new budget and the new medium-term financial plan reflects that. It reflects financial pressures that we've encountered in year and that we're projecting in the year to come. And it also reflects things like new capital projects and other new works that have been identified by the various departments across the council. But given that we've done this so many times already, I'll hand over to Jan and see if she's got anything that she might like to add. Thank you, Chair.
So thanks, Jan. If you give us some headlines, and then we'll go to get some questions from the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, as Councillor Wilmouth has said, the report and in front of you is an update, and it was based on the provisional financial settlement. We are expecting the final settlement today. It is possible that there'll be some further movement in the funding position, and we would then have to reflect that in the final report that goes to Cabinet and then on to Council for approval. The one element where we are hopeful, but probably no more than that, that there'll be some final movement is around the grant to cover the increase in the cost of national insurance contributions, where we're currently estimating will be just over £1 million short of the actual cost. And I know that's an issue that councils have been lobbying the Treasury hard on. So we'll have to wait and see later today whether the government have found some more money to ensure that we can be fully compensated. Other than that, we're not expecting any significant change in the final settlement. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions about the funding settlement, but that's all the intelligence I have at this stage.
Okay, thanks, Jan. So, do we have any questions from the floor?
Yes, so I'm sure, first of all, to say thank you very much. I've been away, so I haven't been able to take part in any of the budget setting process. So it's good. And I'm just getting my head around all the figures. So thank you. And we did have a quick chat with Jan the other day. Just to the one that's disappeared is the Royal Services Grant, which was 2.745 last year. That was the actual the 24. That was in MTP last year. So that one has disappeared. However, there are some larger figures. So last year's MTP was 170 mil plus, and this is 192. But I just wondered what the extra income has been from the grants, and are they affiliated to anything in particular?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dale. Richard, do you want?
I'm sure Jan will have a more full answer, Councillor Dale, but the Rural Services Delivery Grant, I think we were expecting it to be around about 3.2 million this year. That's gone, but I think probably last year you might well be correct that that's what it was, perhaps last year.
Yeah, it's in the MTP for the next 4 years, but I'm not worried about it. I just want to get over the fact that we've lost them, but I want to know what we've gained.
So we lost that, and other councils have, as a result of that, have gained some funding to do with, what was it called, Jan, again? Can you trigger my memory? It was the recovery grant. Councillor Oliver's just told me. So yes, yes. Other councils have benefited from recovery grant. We haven't. We're unique in the North East in that sense. There are other pressures, as Jan's alluded to. One of them was the national insurance, where we've been given some money, but not all of the money to cover it. We have an additional sum of money to cover some of the costs for enhanced recycling projects, but again, I don't think it's quite covering the full amount. That's around about 5 million. And then there are various other bits and pieces. But maybe if I hand over to Jan, she can give you the full list. But we're modestly down, about 2.5 million down on where we'd hope to be, I think, is where we are.
Thanks, Richard. Jan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so that year-on-year comparison is actually quite difficult, Councillor Dale, because a number of grants have been rolled into RSG this year. And in the detailed budget report that's been circulated, there are details of the grants that have been rolled into RSG. But basically, we've done better than we expected on new homes bonus. We have lost the Rural Services Delivery Grant, which we were not expecting, and the government had not given any indication that they were planning to abolish Rural Services Delivery Grant in any of the policy papers or discussions leading up to the provisional settlement. We are 1.1 million down on the National Insurance Grant, and as Councillor Wearmouth has said, we didn't receive any of the recovery grant. We have seen a significant increase in the social care grant, which is the one area of good news. But taken together, we are worse off than we thought we were going to be back in December. I'm very happy to talk you through, if you want, all of the detailed numbers that sit behind that, but that's the headlines.
Councillor Grimshaw?
Thank you. Bearing in mind that we haven't received the final settlement, and as you say, Jan is coming today, would it be possible for us to share that information that you received today with this committee? Bearing in mind that there'll probably be a lot more money coming from the government, bearing in mind that we have gotten a lot more from this government than ever before, with various grants, etc. So I do think that, you might say that there's still a gap, and and you haven't gotten as much. Actually, we have received more, so I dispute that. But I would like to know if it's possible, if we could have some indication when you get this final settlement as to exactly what it is, where it'll go, so we've got some indication of what's happening before the budget meeting in February, if that's possible, Jan.
Thank you, Councillor Grimshaw. Just point out, we did indicate that the one area where we're hoping for some change was the National Insurance grant, and as Jan said, that's going to Parliament today, so I think Jan's okay to circulate that once it does arrive, is that?
Yes, absolutely, Chair. And I think Councillor Wearmouth had his hand up and wants to speak.
I'll come to him in a second.
But perhaps before you bring Councillor Wearmouth in, if I can just clarify, because there have been various figures floating around about what the actual increase in funding has been. So if I just for the committee's benefit, just to clarify that. So the overall increase in core spending power from last year, from this year to next year, is just over £20 million. However, 14 points something, I think it's 14.6 million of that increase is assumed to come from the council tax increase. And in the core spending figures, Treasury assumed that council tax will be increased by the full amount, up to the referendum limit. So the extra money that is coming from government, not council tax, is 5.6 million. And all of that is accounted for by the additional social care grant and the fact that we've done a bit better on new homes bonus. So there is more money, but it's not an extra 20 million that's available to us to go out and spend. And some of that additional funding has new responsibilities attached to it. So hope that's helpful clarification for the committee.
Thank you, Jan. Richard?
Points very well made. Most of it is council tax, and what isn't of council tax leaves us with less pennies to rub together than we started off with in terms of the financial pressures. One thing, we'll wait and see what comes out from government today or whenever it's going to come out. I mean, Jan and I haven't had the chance to speak since before the weekend, but I was on a meeting of the county councils network, and they were saying in fact that we might be under more pressure on national insurance because a number of councils forgot to ask for the right amount of remuneration from the government. So that there may be a downward pressure on that as much as we hope that there will be an upward pressure.
So just to clarify, Richard, what's the net position of the council? Are we worse off or better off?
We were worse off by around 2.5 million compared to what we thought we were going to be, and that's before we get into the various other questions of what we do to support other parts of the wider county council family who have got issues with NI as well, but that's a wholly different matter as well.
Okay, thank you. I think, actually I had Alex. Did you put your hand up, Alex?
But I was going to come in.
Oh, well, go on, look, you can go next then.
My memory is terrible. It comes with age, as I've often said. But if last year we're saying to ourselves, we're looking at 14 million quid worth of efficiencies, and as the Deputy Leader has just said, it's about 2 million, we've got to be better off and not worse off. Am I right in assuming...
Just to clarify, it was 2 million quid worse off on the whole spending settlement, not to do with efficiency.
Yeah, but did we not assume and inform the communities that we would have to have efficiencies this year? Did we or did we not?
So every year we have efficiencies, Councillor,
Yeah.
and this year is no different. What we're talking about are two different things. You're talking about we're talking about the settlement and the fact that we're around about £2.5 million worse off than we thought we were going to be when we were making our estimates in December. You're talking about the financial pressures, which we haven't really discussed, which are all adult social care pressures, all of the SEND, the home-to-school transport, which lumps a load more pressure onto the council in addition. And so you'll see, as you're going through the papers, there's a whole host of savings through BEST and other efficiencies to make sure that whilst we deliver absolutely the frontline services that we always have at the same standard and so on, that we make savings to cover those pressures. So there's savings to be made to cover the pressures in addition.
Thank you, Chair. It doesn't get easier, does it? But can I ask then, hypothetically, if, as Jan says, the government says, look, there's that £1 million that you've lobbied for successfully, what happens to the £1 million?
Well, sorry, if there's an extra £1 million on the National Insurance grant, that means we get an extra £1 million to offset against our losses.
Are we not
so we'll be
now?
£1.5 million down rather than 2.5.
Right, thank you.
Caroline?
Thank you, Chair. So I can't help but be a little bit concerned that we're the Overview and Scrutiny Committee when today we get to find out the full settlement. So we're working on, we've heard words like assumptions, ifs and buts, proposed, there isn't an impact assessment on the potential. So why are we having this overview and scrutiny committee before we have all the information? Because how can we look at things when we just don't have the information and know what the impact is going to be? Surely it would have been more beneficial as a committee to be here next week after we've had the settlement, and so we actually know what that full picture is. Because, as I say, we can't be working on assumptions. We're meant to be the council, and we're meant to be giving people's answers. And actually, when we haven't got the impact assessment of how it's going to affect the people in Northumberland, I think it's a bit of a shame, really.
Okay, thanks. Just before that, just to clarify, budgets are assumptions. We're always working on assumptions. There is no time when there's an exact pounds and penny figure, because that doesn't happen. These are budgets. Budget is by definition a guess, and sometimes I have to remember to remind members of the committee what a budget is. It's not to look back at figures spent. It's a projection of what is going to be spent and what is going to be received. But anyway, Richard.
You could be psychic, Councillor Bond. That's exactly what I was going to say, which is that even after today's settlement, Councillor Bond, you'll still not know, and won't know up until well in year, as to what the actual pots of money are. And so sometimes even after April, we're still waiting for information to come back on various bits and pieces. And so that's why throughout the year, at set points in time, we try to capture a snapshot as best we can. So we started the consultation on the budget in July. You'll remember in years gone by that opposition members and others of all parties and none have said that they wanted that earlier consultation. We did that. We've gone through various iterations of it as best we can. This is the point that we land at now. It'll be different tomorrow. It'll be different in 3 weeks' time. And as Councillor Bourne says, we'll get to budget day, and that'll be the best snapshot that we have on budget day. And that's what we'll settle on and what you'll vote on. But I appreciate the point, but everyone's always in the same boat.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver.
Just a sort of quick remark on that last question. I think it would, one thing we could do is ask the government to give us an earlier settlement, and that would be helpful. But I'm concerned about the paragraph 5.7, which is sort of beyond 25-26. I think 25-26, is happening now. Shortly, we've got a certain degree of sort of foresight, and thank goodness that we had the best programme. Otherwise, I think we really would be struggling. But in the following years, that paragraph sets out that the sort of review of local government finance has started. And the first thing the government have done is the recovery grant, and we haven't got any recovery grants. I'm just worried that if that's the sort of direction of travel, that in following years we might actually end up, falling sort of way behind the curve and being underfunded against metropolitan councils, which seem to be the preferred areas. So. There's that. There's also the potential reliance later on business rates, and the North East in general has a lower sort of level of business rates than some other regions, and Northumberland does as well. So we could end up with a double whammy. So what can we do as a council to sort of lobby between now and this time next year to make sure that we don't get completely left behind?
Okay, thank you. We will actually talk about business rates when we get to the debt recovery report later, but good point. Richard?
Thank you, Councillor. So you're absolutely right. We've got to make a noise all of the time to make sure that we get the best possible deal. It's it's been a little bit troubling that we've got new MPs who don't seem to have put up much of a struggle when it comes to key decisions like the dualling of the A1 and loss of funding there, and there have been plenty of others, and we mustn't allow them to just sit by and watch this government strip us of cash from this authority. It's very difficult to provide services in a rural county like ours, and the loss of the Rural Services Delivery Grant is a sort of striking testament to the fact that I don't think the government really understand that, and we need to all get that message across, and we'll support our MPs in that. I've been critical there, but we must make sure that they understand that and they're making the case for us in Westminster. Ultimately, it's in the hands of the government, though, and we have to just continue to make that case. It is something that should be of concern to everybody. And the second part to your question was on business rates. You'll see in the reports, I think Councillor Bourne's alluded to them, we have a very good track record of actually collecting council tax and business rates. It may be one of the reasons that we've fared so poorly in terms of some of the funding settlements this time around. Hopefully, in the not too distant future, there'll be projects like the data centre with Blackstone QTS. I think the business rates that come for that are around about 7.5 million to NCC and 7.5 million that go to the combined authority as part of the retention scheme. And so when you consider that in full, that's around about I think, Jan, correct me, but 2.5 million roughly is 1% on council tax, or it used to be. I might be a little bit out of date there, but that's the equivalent of 3% increase in council tax or not. Now, what I would hope is that the government would be reflecting what we actually need here and giving us the funding that we need, and then we could reduce the tax burden as time goes on residents as a result of that fantastic investment that this Conservative administration has secured. But obviously if they strip loads and loads of cash from us, then we will struggle to achieve that in the same way.
I think Jan wanted to come in there. Jan?
Yeah, if I may, Chair, two points. In the draft budget report that's going to Cabinet next week, Appendix 12, members will find a full integrated impact assessment, just in response to Councillor Ball's question. And then on business rates, just to comment that one of the reasons why we didn't receive recovery grant was because of the strength of our local tax base. So I think in many respects we have been victims of our own success in terms of our ability to grow the tax base, and if that is something which the government are minded to do more of, to switch funding away from councils that have seen stronger growth in their council tax base, then that is a significant risk for us. But there is going to be a complete reset of the local government funding system over the next year, as well as a comprehensive spending review, which will determine the size of the local government cake. And we, we'll do our best to lobby, for the councils, for the council as part of those discussions.
Just to add, Chair, if I may, with your indulgence, and briefly, I promise, that I think, and I can't remember if it's in one of the papers today or not, but I think that we've brought in around about £10 million in addition compared to what we might have expected in terms of council tax and business rates. And we've actually returned, I think it was £3.5 million to the Treasury to help out, because I know things are tough down there.
Thank you. Councillor Morford?
Thank you very much. I've got a comment and a couple of questions. I'm looking at the proposed efficiencies table on page 35, I think it is, and it's...
Yes, we'll have to do paragraph.
Sorry? It's Appendix 1. Appendix 1. It's very interesting and very important. My comment is that it would be nice to have more explanation of what each of the efficiencies involves, because when I read this, it generates a lot of questions, and my group's got a budget briefing with Jan next week, but I don't want to spend the whole meeting asking her to explain more about each efficiency. So just in future, more information will be really helpful to me. My question is about the £120,000 efficiency for the members' local improvement scheme. I was just wondering, I'm assuming that means that each councillor will get less in their allowance. I was wondering how much less. And then if I could just ask another question, and I might well be corrected on this, but Richard, you mentioned that the data centre is going to generate a lot of income through business rates, but I thought that the government reduced the top-up grant as a result of any increase in business rates, such that an increase in business rates won't generate more income.
That would be one for Jan in terms of the technical detail there. And I think in the bit on members' small schemes, I haven't got the line that you're looking at there, but that might just be the return or anticipated return of some towards the end of this year. So if where it remains unspent, because you might recall that we changed the rules such that if it wasn't spent in a 4-year term, then it was returned into the Treasury and it wasn't carried forwards, because we had some councillors who were carrying tens of thousands of pounds forward over multiple council administrations.
Yeah, well, that would be great news if that was the case. It'd be nice to have confirmation of whether the allowance is going to be reduced.
Okay, Jan, can you address those points?
So on that point, the £120,000 saving relates to the revenue element of members' allowances. So there is no proposal to reduce members' allowances, but you'll probably recall that we last year when we set the budget, we agreed to introduce an additional element of flexibility, which would allow each member to spend up to 2,000 of their overall allowance on small revenue items. Originally, the members' improvement scheme was about capital projects, and therefore there was a minimum amount that could be funded in order to qualify as capital expenditure. So we've done that over the last year, and we built the revenue cost of that into the budget on the assumption that each member would spend £2,000 of their allowance on revenue as opposed to capital. Only a handful of members have actually used that flexibility. The administrative burden attached to it has been completely disproportionate. And so the proposal is that when the new council comes in May, we will revert to the original scheme. And therefore we will not need to provide that £120,000 of revenue funding, which hasn't actually been used this year. So I hope that's helpful.
Sorry, Jan. So
sorry.
Just the headline for Councillor Morford: the limit of £15,000 a year is remaining. Yes. Yeah. There's been no cut in the.
Exactly.
Okay.
And at the end of this administrative term, we will wipe the slate clean in terms of members' allowances, and every member will start with a fresh £15,000 allowance for the new municipal year.
Thanks, Jan. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, another point. Sorry, I have to wait. Business rate reduction. Just on that point.
Yes. So, Councillor Morford's right that there is a top-up grant which which sort of reflects that sort of national redistribution based on needs. I think the point that I was making was not about the current system, but it's about the fact that what we have seen this year with the distribution of the recovery grant is a very clear signal from government that they want to see funding switched to those councils that have a combination of the greatest need and the lowest tax base, so the lowest tax raising ability. And what that has resulted in is this council not receiving any recovery grant. So as the system is reformed, we expect to see a continuation of that policy. And because we have been very successful in increasing our council tax base, and will probably continue to see strong growth in our council tax base going forwards, we could well lose out when there is a reset of the system. That's the point that I was trying to make.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Well, I don't know where to start now. $1.5 million new houses is going to alter everybody's council tax base, isn't it? But going on from what Councillor Morton said about the members of the local improvement grant, we're going to cut the community chest. Is that right?
No, the proposal is to undertake a service review in the context of the additional funding that has been built in for investment in community capacity. So you will see in the draft budget that has been circulated, there is a proposal to invest an additional £800,000 in building that community capacity, and the community chest will be reviewed in that broader context. So actually, it's an increase of £650,000 in the amount that's available, you know, to for that investment in building community capacity, and that work is yet to be done.
Right. I kind of understand. I might have to sit down 5 minutes and think about what you said there, but it looks as if it's not going to be in its present shape or form, shall we say.
Exactly, but
Yeah,
we
fine.
haven't yet undertaken that service review, so I can't tell you what the outcome is going to be. But
Right.
that's the assumption that you know we will you know we will do that over the coming months.
Right. My real question,
So obviously the headline is there's going to be a lot more money available. That's the headline.
in a different form.
Yes, but more money available.
In a different form.
Yes.
That's what the opposition's telling you about. My real question, John, I'm just interested in the numbers here. When you're working out your budget and you've got a draft form and you're using all your assumptions and your best guesstimates and all the rest of it, and you come to a final draft, if you like, how much money has been lost from that by the current proposals? And I want to set that against what you said. What you seem to be saying is there's 5.6 million extra from the government, not counting the additional council tax that we're allowed to set. If we take that figure out, there seems to be 5.6 million coming from central government as an increase, even though it's not touching the sides of a social care budget, but there's 4 million, as far as I can see, that we've actually lost from what you're working out for this budget. Would that be right?
I think, Councillor Robinson, that, as been explained before, there's 5.6 million on the central grant extra coming in, but then we've lost the rural services grant, which is 3.
That's what I'm asking Jan, Chair.
Yeah, I'm
I
just
want the
explaining
numbers.
to you figures that you've already had in this meeting.
Well, I'm
and
asking
there's
it-
also the loss for the NI, which, so the net position is a 2.5 million down, even though the central grant's gone up. The loss of other grants have meant the position is net 2.5 million down. But I'll let Jan confirm that.
Well, if Jan had answered that, then I would have had my question answered, wouldn't I?
So, Appendix 1 to the draft report that was circulated last week, this is the report that's going to Cabinet next week, says that the increase, says that our overall funding for next year from all of the various sources, including council tax, business rates, government grants, etc., will be £471 million. But we have to offset against that all of the different pressures that we face, so for example, you've got pay inflation of estimated at 5.5 million, non-pay inflation 11.8 million, recurrent pressures, social care pressures, predominantly and a significant amount of those in children's, 20.6 million, demographic growth 7.8 million pounds, revenue cost to capital 1.1 million, and non-recurrent pressures and income 14.5 million. So you can see that although there has been a significant increase in the council spending power, that 20.2 million that I referenced earlier, the inflation and the pressures and the growth far exceeds that, and that's why we have to make more efficiencies. We got ahead of the curve last year because we did set a 2-year budget, so we anticipated we would have to deliver significant efficiencies at the time we set last year's budget. So there are £16.3 million of efficiencies that are proposed, but of those, the vast majority were agreed at this time last year. So about 14 million of those efficiencies agreed this time last year, so that we could get ahead in terms of putting all of the plans and the actions in place to make sure that we could deliver them. Because the funding settlement has been a bit worse than we expected, we have had to find some additional efficiencies, about £2 million, just over £2 million of efficiencies. But going forwards, you know, although we have already identified some savings for next year, we still have another about £20 million to find, and then further savings in the next 2 years of the medium-term financial plan. So, it's the usual story, Councillor Robinson. You know, it looks like good news. Yay, we've got an extra 20 million. But we've got an extra £40 million of pressures that we need to fund, and that's why every year we have to bring forward more efficiencies in order to balance the budget.
Thank you, Janet. Just trying to put to bed this ping-pong match that's going on. You know, it's ridiculous. It's semantics. It's people playing politics, and the figures don't lie. You know, simple as that.
Yeah, I think the figures are clear. Thanks, Councillor. Paul, and then I'll come to Paul, and then.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's related to this £20 million part that comes. Of which 5.6 comes from the government directly, and 14.4 is something we need to raise in the form of council tax. Does this target of 14.4 million force us to put a higher council tax than we would wish for? So if the government, say, for example, had given 10 million and then told us, you raise 10 million, the next 10 million through the council tax, we would be raising the council tax less. Am I right?
Richard, I think you want to come on.
Correct, yes. So we're receiving 2.5 million less than we thought we were going to receive. Roughly 1% of council tax is equivalent ballpark to 1% council tax. So we wouldn't have had to increase council tax by as much had we had a better settlement from the government. And returning to that question that Councillor Robinson had posed a moment ago, it's all the stuff on NI, all these other things, all other burdens that weigh out significantly that £5-odd million of additional sum that's come from government that is the problem. It's all the money associated with additional refuse recycling. It's all of the money to do with NI and lots of other things besides that cancel that out and make us worse off, so that we can't cut council tax or can't reduce it by less as a result.
Thank you. In summary, we would have raised less had the government had paid us more.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep, I think that point answered. Okay, Lynn?
Thank you. Well, I don't believe that for 1 minute, because you would have raised it to the max, because obviously for all the efficiencies and everything you were expecting to save. 14 years of your government, and you're now saying there's the Labour government now that's causing all these problems. You've had the opportunity to lobby your government for 14 years to get money, investments into here. And as far, Richard, I've got to address this, as far as dual in the A1, every minister in your government who has held that position has promised to get back into power. The last one was Marie Trevelyan, promised to win a seat, that this was going to happen. Failure, 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 failure. So don't talk to me about it's our government that's stopping it. It was your government. There's no money. They're looking at different things. They're giving you extra money for social care, extra money for children's care. They're getting their priorities right. So I don't need any lectures from your government to tell me and my government of how they are spending their money when it's your government. I know it's a little snide remark that you're getting in with regard to dual of the A1, and because the press is here, unfortunately, it doesn't wash with any of us that's been committee members for a long time. And as far as Best is concerned, that is just another way of...
Well, Alan, Best is...
Excuse me.
Sorry, Lynn.
Yeah.
Best isn't... If we want to talk about Best, that's the next item on the agenda. You'll have a chance to talk about that then.
But it's been brought into this, so it's been brought in. It's been brought in. Somebody's mentioned it. Okay. Best. And the best is just not efficiencies. It's cuts, cuts, cuts. And it's worrying. Yes, it might be on the agenda next, but I'll probably not be brought back in. And the thing is...
Of course you will, Lynn, if you put your hand up.
I don't know. But the thing is, best, it's cuts, 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 cuts again. And I'm worried about the frontline services. Yes, you say that you're going to protect them, but looking at the efficiencies, you know, we've asked before if we are able to get reports to see exactly where the cuts are being, what impact it's going to have, how the residents are being impacted, and how local services, etc., is going to be impacted because we haven't got the capacity or the staff to deal with it. And I notice we're still using agency staff, which is on page 111, and this is in the savings, which I absolutely disagree with. We should be employing our own staff. And I would like to also say, you know, the efficiencies by perhaps getting rid of some more staff, because you've got to, according to this, you're making some more efficiencies, and the impact, like I say, on residents, and also what's going to get done in the county. I'm really concerned about that. And you're calling it design new ways of working. Wow. I don't know who come up with that, but what a load of tosh. That was the last Labour administration. Sorry, that's me finished. Sorry, Chair. Thank you. I've said my piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grimshaw. I'll try and unpack some
Richard,
of that, Chair.
We have had extensive, those figures have been gone over. I think most of the committee understand them. Do we need to go over them again for Councillor Grimshaw?
No, I'll not go over the fact that we're £2.5 million down.
Point of order, Chair. You don't need to go over anything from me. I'm quite capable of taking it in, if you don't mind. Thank you.
I'm just concerned, Councillor Grimshaw, that you didn't seem to accept the figures that you were given by the administration in Jan. Is that the case, or you said you didn't believe them? Is what you said?
We listened to them, and there's more money coming in. I didn't say I didn't believe them. I just yes, we've received the figures. Absolutely, we've received the figures. I just dispute some of the ways it's been perhaps put around a bit, and where the savings are and efficiencies, because I've got still extreme concerns about different areas of where it's been taken from. Good in other areas, but until we actually see the final settlement, then I'll be, just go along with whatever I said, because it's your budget at the end of the day, isn't it?
Okay,
thank you. But I don't need to explain to, because I'm quite capable of taking that in. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Grimshaw. Councillor Dale.
Yes, can I just mention, first of all, I just think that we have to set a budget. And I think the honesty and transparency, without any quips, probably would bring more people together, and unnecessary remarks, because I think we can all throw things at everybody. I could throw things going back 25 years and actually see what's happened. We are where we are in the position now. I hope that, moving forward, that we will actually have a reset of the revenue support grant, because the council needs to get, all councils need to go back. We all know there's the financial difficulties within government. And, wherever we have the inequalities working group, I want to see that we're actually looking at the people who are really in need, the people who live in deprivation, the children, etc. So when we're actually budget setting, I want to see what we're actually going to do to help these people without having, remarks being sent here and there. I'm here to represent the people and to look after those people who need care. So when we do have the budget, I just hope that people will actually be more adult and actually stop making remarks, which we could all do over and over again, and the waste of money, the use of reserves, etc. I'm going back to my little home thing, which is potholes, and we are getting more money for potholes, I gather. I don't know when they'll come in, maybe Jan will know that, but we've had this all the way through all governments. But it actually shows that the inadequacy of the capital provision for our highways and our highways infrastructure. And I think if this council has any power, it would be not about the rural grant, that's not very big, is actually against metropolitan areas who don't have the big highways problems as we have, as against the rural. So if we have anything to go back to government is to have a look at our highways capital budget. They're the ones who bring in the LTP, and we are the ones who have real problems with our highways. And we do need more funding, and people expect more. I haven't seen the resident survey, but I bet you potholes come up. It's not about potholes, it's about managing highways that is the issue. So I think that anything, if you want to go back to government and really have a go, go to our MPs and ask them how they're going to manage, and we need more funding for our highways as against the metropolitan. The metropolitan areas probably might have more areas of deprivation and real problems. I mean, we've got real problems in the northeast. We have problems in Northumberland. But one of the big things, if you want to have a fight for extra money, would be highways.
Thank you, Councillor Dale. Richard?
Yes, absolutely. I promise faithfully to try and avoid mentioning the £2.5 million that we've lost as a result of the funding settlement from the Labour government in future. Coming on to the bit on inequalities, absolutely, we see everything. It's one of the three priorities. Councillor Dale, I know you've been away, but in every budget presentation it's been mentioned. We're continuing with all of the to provide as much support as possible in terms of council tax support. We're still one of the most generous councils if you pass the budget in the North East. We've got a whole host of stuff going on with BEST that seeks to steer the council in a way that will drive tackling inequalities across all of our communities. On the pothole point, what I think, if I recall correctly, the previous government had in place was £180 or so million settlement to the council over 10 years, I think it was, and that was sort of spinning out of HS2 and cancellation and so on and so forth. We do have some funding settlements so far. We don't know what it's going to be, though, because it has come to the combined authority. So whilst we have an idea what we think it should be coming down from the combined authority, that currently sits with Kim McGuinness and NECA at the moment, and we will receive it in due course. But I don't know if Jan knows when we anticipate that before you come back in. Jan, do you have a sight on that at the moment?
I don't, I'm afraid. I think it's hopefully it's going to be in the next couple of weeks. But we think that our share of that pothole funding will be about 8.5 million, which would be a bit more than we've had in recent years.
Yeah, so that would put that at around about 29 million, because we've got around about 21 million that comes through the normal part of the LTP settlement, if I'm out memory of the plan.
That's right. So that's the maintenance grant and the pothole fund, and then there is this additional amount through the additional highways maintenance budget. So there are different elements to it, which is why it's slightly complicated.
Absolutely, and to put it in context, Councillor Dale, for this year, we had 36 million that we spent on roads, potholes.
I think I'm looking at the LTP actually, and the management and the capital investment on highways, which is very different from what pothole seems to be up here, which is fill our pothole, which I find incredible. Everybody's saying we get more. That's not actually what the funding we require is. So, I mean, anything grateful, and I grab anybody from anything from any government that's actually going to be spent. However, that is where I think we have a real problem, and it is hindering everything from business to
be reassured, Councillor Dale, every year the leader writes and asks for more money for roads, regardless of the colour of the government, and
we never get
sometimes we're successful.
Not
sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not, but we always try.
Thank you. Carla?
Thank you, Chair. So first off, since we seem to be in full election mode now, so Richard, would you agree that the previous 14 years, like every time the council taxes went up, it's been down to the Tory government, or is that just an assumption? And then can I also ask, can we have the impact assessment in future meetings when we turn around and say that with corporate services and economic scrutiny, if we can produce a budget based on assumptions and best guesses, surely we can produce an impact statement on them best guesses as well, because if we're talking about an assumption of a cut in children's services or budgets anywhere, surely we should be able to know what them impacts are going to be for the council departments. And again, when it comes down to the headlines, it would be nice to have a bit of a breakdown to see where these cuts are going to happen as well, not just the top line.
Okay, thank you. Richard, do you want to answer that?
Well, across those 14 years, a number of those were spent with a Labour council who was shocking at managing the finances of this council, and we left with the impact of that. We've managed to just about get it under control, and then we've got a Labour government that's cutting our funding. But I won't be political, because let's move on from that bit, shall we?
Okay, Jan, you did mention that there is an impact assessment.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, and will this this committee get the copy of that, Councillor Ball, too?
So it has been distributed to all members, not just members of the Scrutiny Committee. That was done last week, so that members of this committee would have an opportunity to see the detail of what's going to Cabinet. And it was because of the exactly Caroline, Councillor Ball's point about the timing of the meeting. Unfortunately, the budget has to go to Cabinet next week. There is no, there is no leeway with that because of the timetable for the budget being approved by full council on the 19th of February and the council tax resolutions being approved. That is why, although the agenda for Cabinet is not being published today, that's why we circulated the draft budget report that is going to Cabinet last week. And as I said, Appendix 12, there are 19 appendices to that report, but at Appendix 12, there is a full integrated impact assessment.
Thank you, Jan. So everyone's noted where that is in the report, so you can review it. Michael?
Jan, I just want to ask about the social services side of the budget, which seems to be experience exponential growth, shall we say. I presume when you did the budget, you baked in an increase into that figure, and yet every year we seem to be way and above whatever we expected. And I'm just wondering what that looks like. If it was a graph, would it be a 20% angle? Would it be a 45% angle? Would it be a 60, 70, 80% angle? What sort of shape does that growth look like? Because it seems to be explosive.
Thank you. Jan?
So where we are seeing a real escalation in social care costs is children's. I think Neil is in the chamber and can speak to what's happening in adults, but certainly in children's, we have seen gradually increasing pressures on that budget, and over the last year those pressures have really taken off. So we had already identified this. So you will recall that last year we built in funding to allow us to open some new children's homes. There was some capital funding and also revenue funding to enable us to make more beds available in our in-county children's homes, council run, because of the significant pressures we were seeing on the external residential placements. And in this year's budget, so new group home has come on stream in this year, and that is helping to reduce some of that demand. In this year's budget, there are proposals to open a further 12 in-county beds in order to mitigate against that underlying pressure. So we are doing what we can, but the real issue, in terms of underlying demand, is a much broader issue, and in terms of what's driving that demand, there are multiple complex factors. And I think this is something which has been discussed at some length at the Family and Children's Services Scrutiny Committee. So I don't know if we have any members from that Scrutiny Committee in the chamber, but there have been much more detailed briefings about you know, those are underlying factors that are driving that pressure. But we're doing what we can to try and you know, and manage it. But it's not within our direct control.
I understand that, John. And, you know, I've asked for a presentation so we can understand this a bit better. All I'm kind of asking is, what does that growth look like? What does that growth in demand look like so we can appreciate just how difficult it is, you know, to manage it? You know, you could talk about significant pressures and whatnot. I just want to know what it looks like so I can visualise it myself, if you like.
You want to meet there, John?
Sorry, I don't have that to hand. I don't know if there are any officers from Children's Services in the chamber that might be able to answer that question. But if not, you know, I can get that information circulated after the meeting.
Yeah, can we get that circulated then to members? Preferably in some kind of graph form as well, if that's possible, just so we can see the angle. Okay, does anyone else have any comments on this report before we move on? Questions? No? Well, thank you very much. Members, that was very good. Oh, sorry, Paul.
I think I just learned that we are proposing to remove the £2,000 revenue from membership scheme. I think that is somewhat misguided, in my opinion. That's my remark, because it allows councillors to the flexibility to spend the money as they like in their ward-specific problems. So, and also 1 year is not a long enough period to come to any meaningful conclusion. It has been trial, so I'll be writing my remarks and thoughts to the council cabinet.
Thanks, that Mark. Right, okay, I think we're done with that report, so thank you very much, members. That was a very in-depth and interesting discussion. Right, moving back to the agenda. Next item is item 7. This is the medium-term financial plan 25-29 and 30-year business plan for the housing revenue account. So, Richard, do you talk to this first?
I think probably I'll pass across to Jan, if that's okay. They're quite self-explanatory documents, and you've obviously, I think really what probably we're here to do is respond to any particular questions on what's in those two plans rather than explain them in that sense.
Okay, so Jan, any headlines before I put it out to the floor for questions?
No, Chair, I'm assuming members have read the report. The headline rent increases following the usual formula of CPI plus 1% for the rent increase.
Yeah. Okay, so it's the standard CPI plus 1%. Right, so you've had the report. Are there any questions or remarks? Alex?
Thanks, Chair. Just a little explanation, I think. I'm probably wrong again, but just I think we've spent a little bit of time over the last hour talking about the Rural Services Delivery Grant being stopped. In the appendix, Integrated Impact Assessment, on page 89, it identifies...
Which appendix is that? Sorry.
It's a big one, Richard. Integrated Impact Assessment, screening section and assessment form. It comes at the end of the report, and it's numerous pages, too many.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just
I haven't
trying
got enough fingers to work on. It's quite a big one, but basically it's got page 89 for the members written on it, and it's 1.9 rural and coastal communities. It's specific to rural and coastal communities. We've just spent a bit of time talking about how monies for a rural services delivery grant has been stopped. And the words here say, no different to any customer living in built-up areas.
Thank you.
Clearly, there has to be. When you're talking at length about monies no longer coming through, it must have an impact on them communities. And for coastal communities, I can tell you, in my ward, there's a couple of coastal communities, and if it hadn't been for a data centre coming, it's been forgotten since the Anglo-Saxons invaded. It's had no done to it. You know, I appreciate this is HRA and not the total services. I appreciate the difference. And in fact, we don't have any council properties in that area. But I still think when it says no different to any customer living in built-up areas, they're missing a point.
So,
just if you can explain that to me, that's all.
yeah, I
Thanks,
can
Alex.
do. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah.
Just to make sure I understand, because
Yeah.
I'm trying to do this electronically,
I understand,
is
it's
that the
different.
housing revenue account report?
Yeah.
And so don't forget that the housing revenue account is a completely ring-fenced box, and
Yes.
so nothing goes into it and nothing comes out of it. So in the context of the Rural Services Delivery Grant not being there anymore, that's core council business, that stays away from the HRA. So what you've got here is the council's programme in there of building and of maintenance and so on and so forth, and there should be, and I firmly expect there to be no difference in terms of what your residents experience in across parts of your ward and up and down the coast or otherwise. It will be exactly the same. So hopefully that helps cover that bit.
I think
It's hard for me, and I think you're explaining it, it's hard for me to distinguish that it's only for HRA. Because I can remember pre-Brexit, the county were the administrators, but I was chairman of the Northumberland Local Fisheries Association, and we spent about 3 million European funding on communities, coastal communities, who were being neglected. Now I'm talking about from the Tyne to the Tweed. And when I read no different to any customer living in built-up areas, that is not the same as living in the centre of Morpeth or the centre of whatever town you, Alnwick, for example, you want to choose. It's a different life altogether.
It absolutely is a different life
Yeah,
altogether. I'm a regular visitor to your ward, councillor. I
know
go for
you
a
are.
walk along the beach there, and
Yeah.
it's a fantastic asset. What this is driving at, or what that statement's saying, is that if you need a repair done in a building in one of such community, that you will receive it on the same sort of time period as you would be waiting for your boiler repair or this or that or the other. When it and that's because it's all wrapped up in one account for repairs, for maintenance, for new build, and so on and so forth, in that roughly £45 million box or so in terms of capital. Yeah. And you know, notwithstanding, sometimes I guess it might be difficult to get people out at any one time to anywhere across the county because we have a huge expansive county. That is what that statement's saying. If you want to take a particular issue with any particular example, you'd have to follow that up with the officer and make sure. Just coming back to the bit on the Rural Services Delivery Grant, of course, just because that's been removed doesn't mean that we won't be serving the rural community with 3.2 million. We just have to cut our cake accordingly and absorb that difficulty and use other forms of cash and so on and so forth.
Thanks for taking the time to explain that.
No problem at all.
Yeah.
okay. Right. Who is next? Nick.
Thank you. In Appendix 1, it's great to see that the Affordable Housing Investment Programme is increasing from an expected £7 million outturn this year to 18 million next year. So that's an increase of 150%. Do we have the capacity to deliver that?
Yes. So there's some really interesting work going on across all parts of the council and across partners as part of the county partnership that the chief executive's taken a really strong lead on alongside all of you. You've had the meeting not so long ago, for those of you that were able to attend, of the inequalities meeting on housing, and that was looking at how we speed up delivery. So, for example, you have really interesting, and I'm sure that this is public domain, but I'll risk it anyway. Benicia delivering houses in Berwick, for example, but the St Homes are assisting them in that build-out from Advanced Northumberland's housing arm, of course. And so you've got cross-collaboration on a number of these things in the anticipation and hope of speeding up house building for those that need those houses the most across the county. And that's very different, of course, to concreting over the county. What we want is the right house in the right place for the right folks.
Okay, do you have any more, Malcolm?
Thank you. You know, 2-3 years ago, we were asked to approve £45 million out of the HRA to build affordable housing, to build social housing. It was social housing at the time. I think it's affordable housing now. But, now I asked about it ever since. It disappeared for a year or two. Nobody could answer the question where it had gone. And I found it again today. 36.3 million going into this project. 10 million from Homes England. So 46 million, sizable investment, great. Going to get some social housing. What I want to know is, and asked at the time if all this property would be 100% owned by NCC, and they said yes. So it will be our council houses. Will they be available at social housing rates or affordable housing rates?
So, Jan may correct me and step in if I misstep, but basically anything that's in the HRA is council housing until such a time as someone buys it off us under right to buy or not. So it's council housing, social housing, however you want to describe it, and the rents that apply are the rents that are prescribed by you when you pass this paper, hopefully through council. So those will be the levels of rent, and the increase is governed, as Jan mentioned at the start, by first of all what we need. Our rents are very inexpensive compared to what you would find on the market if you were going to a private landlord, shall we say, and the rent is pegged to inflation plus 1%. Now, ironically, I think that was 1.7% plus 1% potentially this year. If it had been a month later, it would have been 2.7% plus 1%. And that's the sort of weird way that we have of actually identifying council rents. And that may be something that the government tackles in due course, I don't know, because that affects significantly what comes into the HRA, which is the only way that we can maintain our stock and enhance and purchase more stock or build more stock. It has to be in that money. And the only time where, I think that you mentioned Homes England, if I recall correctly, Homes England money coming in there, I think might be part of the Blythe deep dive and the refurbishment of the properties in Croft Ward, just outside the town centre, where we've accepted money to do some refurbishment on our property, and we've accepted other money, I think, from various parts of government to do similar things on the rest of the stock, bring it up to a much higher rating in terms of the efficiency rating, which is great for our residents, obviously, because it means they're not having to spend so much money on fuel.
The reason I asked was because when it was proposed, Phil Soderquist stood up there, took us through all the proposal, explained the HRA, but the proposal was to go in with third parties on this project. That's why I asked if they'd be 100% owned by NCC, so we maintained control over them, and by control I mean how much we're charging rents. That's what I would like to guarantee about.
So Jan might come in, but anything that's in the HRA account is us. Anything that's a wider partnership with Benicio, with Carbon and so on is just part of a wider strategy. So, for example, we've had delivered through the local plan and through planning around about 2,500 now, I think, getting on towards 3,000 affordable homes in one way, shape or form. Obviously, that affordable bracket, everyone wants to understand what it is, and you've got all sorts of categories in that, but Malcolm. But I'll hand over to Jan if she just wants to be clear about what that funding covers and what it doesn't cover.
Jan, just to clarify on that point.
Yeah, I think we're confusing affordable and social housing.
Absolutely.
So affordable housing is something different from social housing. Social housing is council houses, which are part of that ring-fenced HRA. Affordable housing is, although sometimes the terms are used interchangeably, affordable housing is about housing which is available for sale or private rent at affordable prices stroke rents relative to market rates. So the council has a number of projects which are about increasing the supply of affordable housing, and a number of those we're doing in partnership with other bodies, but that is something entirely different from our own council housing stock, which is what this report is about. So this report is about how much we're going to charge for rents to our tenants in that council housing stock, and how we plan and how much we plan to spend on maintaining those properties and increasing the supply of council properties. So I hope that explains the distinction.
I think members who are on planning will recall a lot of applications come forward with an affordable housing element that are built by the developers under the affordable housing rules. So it's a much wider thing. Councillor
Right, yes, I just say we had this conversation the other day at the committee's scrutiny committee, because there was a muddle between affordable and social, and we had to make it very clear because we were talking about the allocation policy and the changes to the allocation. That when you are, can you hear me? Am I turned on or not? Sorry. I do hope that when you're looking to assess where, that you do look at the allocation policy to see where the priority is required for those who are homeless. And it is important because the changes, I think, and quite a lot of those, not all of them, will be on benefit too, or will have housing benefit. Not all, but 50%. So in the areas I look at, where there is, but anyway, the point being is, can we just keep this conversation separate? I had to remind them the other day, it's social housing, it's not affordable housing. It's a totally different thing, and we need to keep that separate all the time.
Yeah, they are very different things.
Very briefly,
but
yes.
If we just stay on the HRA, really.
Yeah, we will do, and you'll see some interesting stuff coming forward in terms of housing allocation, and of course some work that'll have to be done to the local plan in due course regarding the additional housing allocation. But I think we've kind of settled the HRA bit.
Yeah, we'll stay with the HRA. Any other points on this report? No. Are we happy to agree with, approve it? Yeah. Okay, next on the agenda we have Best, and Councillor Grimshaw, you're welcome to come in if you wish. So we have, Richard, do you want to give us a quick overview?
Yes, I can do. I think, again, a lot of councillors have received significant talk through this by Jan and by Jill. I think it was that went through it on the call with councillors about a week and a half ago, was it? It's been socialised heavily across the whole of the organisation. This is our work to bring the council firmly up to date in terms of how it interacts with residents, prioritising frontline services, making sure that we get the best possible value for in everything that we do. I don't know that I can really say very much without getting into either so much detail that you'll want to fall asleep and you'll not ask any questions, or so little detail that I've barely said anything at all. But I don't know if Jan has some bullets to have.
Have you got some headlines before we go into questions on this one?
Yes, so members will be aware that we brought the original strategic business case to Cabinet for approval 2 years ago. We've done a huge amount of work since then, delivered a number of projects, but this is about an updated and revised strategic business case to take us forward for the next 4 years. It will require some investment, but we think the scope for delivering efficiencies and wider benefits. And I think it's really important to stress that this is not just about saving money, but it's also about improving the customer experience and building that capacity and resilience in our communities. Because the customer first element is a really, really important strand within the programme that's being proposed. So in overall terms, we think there's scope for delivering about roughly double the amount of financial efficiencies and a range of customer benefits. And that is all set out in the strategic business case that will be coming to Cabinet for approval. Clearly, in order to deliver those benefits, we need to make provision for the investment, and that has been built into the draft budget. So there will be, there will be a lot more detail in the strategic business case itself, but without the necessary budget approvals, clearly that remains just a paper document. The report that you have in front of you that went to Cabinet in January was a bit of a placeholder, saying that the strategic business case is coming and alerting members to the fact that we would be building the resources that are needed to deliver that strategic business case into the draft budget. It is a bit chicken and egg. Should we ask Cabinet to approve the strategic business case before the necessary funding approvals are in place, or the other way around? We're trying to twin track it, but there is clearly a lot more detail that sits behind this. What it does do is build on the work that we've already been doing over the last 2 years, and there have been a number of briefings to this committee and wider briefings, most recently on the community's first element at the policy conference 2 weeks ago, and we would intend to do a lot more briefings on different aspects of BEST as we go forward. So, Chair, I appreciate that the detail perhaps that members are looking for at this stage is not in front of them, but it is coming, is what I would say.
Right, thanks for that. Bearing that in mind, Nick?
Yeah, can I just clarify in paragraph 5.5 that the target savings of 60 million are recurrent target savings?
Sorry, Councillor, could you repeat your question? I know you said paragraph 5.5.
Are the target savings of 60 million recurrent?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, thank you.
And cumulative.
And cumulative. Current and cumulative, well, that's even better. Malcolm?
Jan, I just want to know how much weight we have given income generation in the medium-term financial plan.
Sorry, are you talking specifically in relation to BEST?
No, I'm still on the medium-term financial plan.
Okay. Well, I'll let Jan answer that. That's naughty.
Well, you haven't moved on, Chair.
We've moved on too.
We have. It's on the next item. But Jan, if you can answer that question, then.
So in terms of income generation, in the draft budget, we have inflated income on the assumption that we, just either fees and charges or other income, where appropriate, has been uprated to reflect inflation. Within BEST, there is a small element which relates to additional income generation, but it's relatively small in the overall scheme of things.
Okay, thanks.
I just think we're missing the trick if we don't embrace it a bit more.
Any other?
Yeah.
Lynn?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask a question, please? We are trying to have efficiencies, slash, you know, making people not have any jobs any longer for whatever reason. But what happens if in a specific department there's a lone worker, and if a lone worker goes on long-term sick, what impact is that on residents who we've got to appease that perhaps the work's going to get done? In fact, we can't possibly tell them because there isn't anybody else in the department to be able to deliver it. So could I just ask a question? You know, what coverings have we got for those you know, incidents? Because I say it's wow. And if we're not wowing our residents by not being able to give them some concrete, you know, like answers, then there's nothing wow about it.
Okay, thanks, then.
Thank you.
Jan, have you got an answer to that?
I assume when you talk about a lone worker, you mean we only have one officer providing those services?
That's right, Jan.
Right, okay. Well, it would be exactly the same as it is at the moment. You know, if somebody goes on long-term sick, maternity leave, whatever, that we would arrange for cover to be put in place to ensure that those functions are still carried out.
Thank you. May I come back? Could I ask, you know, what timelines would that be then, please, if you don't mind?
Sorry, what? I'm not quite
Well,
sure I
how long
understand what you're asking.
Yeah.
How long? Well, for however long it's needed. I mean, if it's maternity leave, and people can take up to 12 months for maternity leave, we would normally arrange for somebody, probably on a fixed-term contract, to come in to cover that maternity leave. With long-term sickness, you know, it might be open-ended. You don't know how long somebody's going to be off.
That's right, but I'm just wondering if there's you know, when is actually going to come into effect? You know, you envisage somebody is going on, you know, a long time or quite a lengthy time on sick, but in the meantime, how long are you going to give that work to just lie there and not get done? Because obviously you might have to have agency staff in, or the work doesn't get done, and we've got to appease our residents. And I just wonder, when does that actually kick in for to get the works done? You know, for to have a catch up, because obviously you'll have a backlog if it doesn't get sorted sooner than later. Sorry, I know it's a hypothetical question.
Well, it's really difficult to answer because, you know, it depends on the particular circumstance. If someone goes off sick, you know, you know, you wouldn't have notice of that. If somebody's going on maternity leave, in most cases, you would have advance notice of that, so you can plan ahead. You know, so I don't think there is a single answer to that, you know, other than to say that, you know, you would look at whether there is capacity within the wider team to provide cover in the short term while you put those arrangements in place. But if you only have one person that's capable then of providing those services or that expertise, then clearly that points to a single point of failure. And one of the things that we are trying to do through BEST is to ensure that we have a more resilient and agile organisation. So removing those single points of failure, you know, hopefully will actually improve the customer experience, because if somebody does go on long-term sick leave or any other type of unplanned leave, it doesn't leave a massive gap. And that's no different from what we currently do.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, Jan. Is there anything in proposals in BEST that would adversely affect the situation that Councillor Grimshaw was outlining?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ball?
Thanks, Chair. So I still have some concerns about the BEST programme, and we talk about customer first and communities first. But I think some of the roles that people in, whether it be customer services and our libraries, are expected to pick up, they are still expected to still do their first job as such as well. And I can't help but worry that some things will fall through the net. We end up with people coming to us presenting at later stages in a crisis point, which ends up almost costing the council more money because it hasn't been picked up in the community, or we don't have the expertise within the community or the resources within the community. So I do worry that some of that may not be picked up, and I also think it could be a corporate risk that simply, if somebody presents at a crisis point, maybe the staff that work in some of these services haven't got the specialist skills of social workers or that crisis team. And I just do worry as well when we're relying more and more on technology that more people will fall through the gaps. So I personally, as somebody that knows the system, knows the website, still struggle to get to the point where I actually need to get. So if you are somebody that's trying to refer a family member or get support at a crisis, and then you've got to somehow navigate our terrible website, which even when you type stuff into the search function, you will struggle to find the services that you need. Then if you are directed to the 0345 number, you get a generic customer service agent who's trained to take a message and pass it on, really, rather than put you through to the actual people that you need. And it's a case of, we'll call you back. And if you're at crisis point or you're needing support, I do worry that we're losing that human touch as well, and not everybody's savvy with technology. And I just do worry that we are going to end up with people presenting later or just giving up to the point where they might fall through a hole and we end up having to pick them up at a later point. So I do worry that the communities first model, I get it, I understand, but I also think we need to make sure that the systems are fit for purpose as well.
Okay. Thank you, Caroline. Any comments on that, John?
If Jill O'Neill is in the chamber, Chair, could I ask Jill to respond?
Jill,
Thanks, Jan, and happy to have further conversation, Caroline, outside of here. What you raise is our genuine points. We've already done some early work with our workforce who are really receptive to the new skills and competencies. Want to reassure you that if people are presenting in crisis, those crisis services aren't going anywhere. They will still be there. This is about being able to have a broader conversation in the community so that we can pick up things earlier, as well as those staff being trained appropriately with the skills and competencies to know when the thresholds are met for onward referral. But there's a lot of work to do. We're not just landing this. This is about making sure the workforce is fit and ready to take this on board, and we've got the fail-safes in place as well.
Yes.
It's just, for me, it's some of that, the logistics of it. If you're presenting a crisis point, you're going to lose your home, you haven't got any money to pay your rent, you've lost your job, having to physically walk into the customer service centre or a library where somebody's trying to check in the books or you've lost someone. I just think some of that logistics as well needs the fine detail because I just do think that impact, because I know people that would walk into a library and then walk away.
Okay. Any comment on that, Jill?
Just to say that the housing team aren't going anywhere. The housing team will still be there for crisis.
That's reassuring. Thank you. Right. I think I had Councillor Bainton next.
Thanks, Chair. It's more a comment, really, and probably a request. At the presentation, I had a great answer to my question, which was on procurement. Basically, that we shouldn't be looking at what's the cheapest if you buy it out of the area to being quoted more from being in the area, but it creates employment and keeps the revenue in there. And I got a very good answer but I would like, and I know if Jan said it's going to be expanded, that there should be more in that section explaining that in the next sort of follow-up report on that.
On procurement?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's just noted, I think. Yeah. We have to answer. Paul? Yeah.
I think John has stolen my question, actually.
Well,
but nevertheless, I'll go with it in the sense, I think that the best program in general is one of the best things we have accomplished as a council, because inefficiencies, unless you consciously look for it, they remain hidden and then tend to grow, So that's good. And when I was watching developments in Washington, D.C. in January, the new administration is coming up with a new department called Department of Government Efficiency. So when I looked at it, hey, we have already done it 3 years ago. They are copying us. But anyway, my question is, it's good. I think sometimes I see that the expected savings will be 60 million, etc., X million. For me, that personally, X million is not, what the value of X is not important. Any savings is good, right? But coming to my question, I think Councillor Veronica and I introduced in voluntary service committee are also on the well-being, that there is a social value equivalent. Do you remember that, Jill, the value, social value, we have to incorporate social value. Okay. So I just wondered, Jan, whether it is part and parcel of the best, or the social value element is orthogonal to this. I would rather like to see, the social value element being part and parcel of best, looking at the things.
Okay, so I think the question is best just financial, or does it have a social element to it? Jan, you've got to answer that.
Yes, social value is a really important part of it, alongside trying to drive out efficiencies in our external spend on goods and services. We're also going to be implementing the new Procurement Act, which comes into effect this month, and that has a much greater emphasis on demonstrating social value. I think we already do a lot of work around social value, and I think that will become, an even greater area of focus and more transparent under the new reporting arrangements. But I can assure councillors that is absolutely part of the programme of work that we have planned.
Thanks, Jan. Malcolm? Oh, well, I'll get Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. Just with reference to that, some years ago this council did a project, and it was called LM3, Local Multiplier 3, and it found that £1 spent locally with a local firm was worth 3, whereas £1 spent outside of the area was worth 2. So we have done that evidential work somewhere. It was Jeff Reed's time. But best, I'm slightly sceptical about when it came, and I understand Lynn's points, because it could easily have been just a vehicle for cuts, and I don't believe that's what it is now. So there is opportunities within that, and I think the opportunities outweigh the disadvantages. But going back to the figures, 17 to 38 million was what we were told when it came in. I thought that was okay. It was slightly ambitious. We seem to have given that steroids now, and we've gone up to 60 million. But we're talking about the programme's evolving maturity, which seems a hell of a maturity to go from what we settled at 20 million to 60 million. But new opportunities for efficiencies. Now, I presume, and I'm not going to ask you what they are, but I presume these have been identified so you can come up with a figure of 60 million. Is that correct?
Jan's
yes,
nodding.
it is.
Yeah, she's nodding there. Right, okay. Nick, there you go. Everyone's up to speed.
Just a quick comment. I hope that President Trump is going to credit our leader if his Doge programme is a success.
I will sure be writing to him to claim that in due course.
Chair, to be fair, I think we did raise it with President Trump last time he was in office, that he might like to come and see how he could build a wall, having done it around about 1900 years before him. Yes, he'd be very welcome to see how the council's making progress in that regard.
Okay, do you have any more comments on best or questions? No? Right, well, thank you. We'll note that report. Thanks, Jan. Moving on the agenda, go to the debt recovery update. So, Richard, do you want to introduce this?
Yes, I will. Obviously, you receive this debt recovery paper every year. As I recall, the worst offenders every year when it comes to business rates are the NHS, something that we're pursuing with them. And we can't really understand why it is that they still can't pay their bills on time with all of that funding at their disposal, but there we are. As ever, the team in Revenue and Benefits do a fantastic job in gathering the income for the council in terms of council tax and business rates. Just like to place it on the record, on behalf of the leader, myself and Councillor Posh, our sincere thanks to Jan and everybody across all of that department. And I'll leave the rest to Jan.
Do we have any headlines before we get to questions?
Yes, Chair. Just to give a bit of a further update, it is a report that comes twice a year to scrutiny to give a snapshot as at the end of the financial year and then halfway through. This report is a report given the position is at the halfway point at the end of September. The recommendation is that the committee notes the report. It's broken down into various sections. The first part, write-offs, details the levels of write-offs, various reasons. The usual ones are because a customer is insolvent, the customer may have absconded and despite attempts to trace haven't been able to find, or simply may not be able to pay. The next part, sundry debt. The overall debt, overdue debt, compared to September 2023, the overall amount due in September 2024 was down by around 6 million compared to the year before, and the overall debt was down by around 9 million in comparison to the previous year. There's a summary of customers with debts of over £100,000 at the end of September. That figure has reduced by around 6.7 million since the end of September. Council tax, although the collection rates are slightly down compared to 2023-24, the in-year collection rate was the second highest of 11 North East councils, and it was above the national average. The Q2 performance, the collection rate at the end of September was 54.35% for council tax, and that at that point was the highest of the 11 North East councils. The average was 53.1%. And for the benefit of members, the Northumberland does consistently perform well when it comes to council tax collection. There's some information in the report about the various recovery methods that are used and the actions taken. Non-domestic rates or business rates, collection rate improved from the 22-23 financial year. It's still below the average of the North East. The North East average was 97.7 and the national average 97.2%. Q2 performance, the collection rate at the end of September was 54.28%. It's been documented before, Chair, that the demographics in Northumberland are such that we have a lot of smaller businesses that contribute to the business rates pot, and whereas in some of the neighbouring authorities they have some very large businesses, large properties, not so much in number, but the amount that they contribute individually to the pot is significant. Again, there's some information about the various recovery methods used. Housing benefit overpayments, they continue to perform well, despite that the opportunities for recovery are gradually reducing. One of the main recovery options was to reduce ongoing housing benefit, but because of the introduction of universal credit, that option is gradually reducing as more people go into universal credit. Housing, the performance figures are there in terms of collection and arrears. The housing team continued to support customers and tenants in hardship with their welfare benefit support officers, and In the last financial year, they helped to support over £500,000 for tenants. There's in the report, there's details of the various charges, recovery actions, arrears, and I recall, Chair, at a previous meeting, there was a request for an update to be given on the impact of universal credit on housing tenants. The aim is to bring that to the next meeting. It was hoped to be today, but because of the heavy agenda, it's been postponed
Thanks,
until the next
that's
time.
noted. We will get that specific report next meeting. Okay, Lynn?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that report, and that was what I had noted with regard to the universal credit and the the transformation onto the etc. benefits. So thank you very much for that, and I do know and recognise the fact that your officers are working very hard in that department to assist these people. So I'll be delighted to read the report when it comes at the next meeting. But thank you for that, and your officers are working very hard, and it clearly recognises that. So thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Any other questions or queries on that report? It's the regular report we get. Malcolm?
Page 118, I just noticed the three at the bottom's council. I say one's been paid, but I was saying we're not paying our own bills here. I mean, as far as the other stuff goes, if you take NHS Education and Council out, it's more than half the debt that's owed anyway. But the last two council ones, I was saying, the invoices remain outstanding, being pursued. We're going to take action against ourselves.
I'm not sure this is this council. This is other councils, isn't it? Or is it this council?
I'm sure it's not this council.
This is other councils.
There are
money.
Invoices issued to some other councils that we provide services for right across the board. And as at the end of September, those amounts were outstanding. That's a cut-off point. An invoice becomes due 30 days, usually 30 days from issue. If it comes to the 30th, if it comes to 30 days from issue and it hasn't been paid, then it's overdue. It might get paid on day 31 or 32, in which case it's paid and it's gone. But that is a snapshot as at the end of September. And our team does pursue debts, and it is fair to say with other councils, it's not usually a problem securing payment. It's sometimes that they're not as prompt at paying as they ought to be.
It's
just when it says council, it's not this council.
Yeah, it's other councils.
Absolutely not.
All else fails, we'll send the troops in, yeah?
Okay, Caroline?
It's just with regards to the debt write-off on page 117. It would just be nice again to have a little bit more detail in that. So where it's like housing rent and other debt and sundry debt, just why is this debt being written off? Is there something that we can be doing about it? I know obviously there is staff and resources being put towards this, but it would be just be nice to have a little bit more detail on that, that's all.
I think, yes, so basically,
provide
under
details
the sundry label, maybe there's a breakdown of the flavour of things that it means, because sundry obviously just means miscellaneous. So I think that's what we're proposing.
Yeah, and just when it is again housing, rent and other debt, and just a little bit more when it says benefit over payments, if we could have a bit of a look, so we can almost have a bit of a deep dive, so we can tackle some of them issues when we look at inequalities and everything else. Actually, is there a reason why that one group are not able to pay their rent, or they have, you know what I mean? So being able to look, if we're talking about putting some kind of getting upstream, tackling these problems before they happen, and seeing what we can do to do better to help people before they get into situations as well.
Yeah. Okay. Could we have that information maybe? It's a separate sort of note. Thank you. Right. Catherine?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks also to the team that have been working on this. I just see on page 118 the NHS customer the invoices that have been given out and they're taking so long. I think somebody did say something about that earlier. Did you say something about that earlier? The reason why they're taking so long?
Yeah, it's they're presumably their internal processes.
Yeah. Well, with the NHS and other many bodies, my understanding is that there are various levels of approval within the NHS for approving payment of invoices. So, whereas we may invoice to a central point, when it reaches that end, it will depend on where it needs to go to be approved. And again, a bit like some councils, the NHS, they usually do pay their invoices. It's just
it's just over 30
the
days.
It's been that way for.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe Jan might know, I don't know about the, the loan that we gave to the NHS for the Berwick Hospital, the 25 million. I just wondered would that come into this, or is that something, would that come on something else? I just wondered how that is being paid back, or is...
I wouldn't... sorry, I think what Jan, what's one might for you, this, Catherine's mentioned the £25 million loan we gave to the NHS for Berwick Hospital.
Yep, so we invoiced them for that in the same way. I'm not aware that there's any issue with them paying the interest and the principal on the due dates in relation to those loans. But the NHS are notoriously poor at paying their bills on time. But as Keith has said, they do eventually pay their bills, unlike some of our other debtors.
Okay, right, that's good to know. Right, any other questions or queries in that report? No, thank you very much, thank you. We'll move on then. Next thing on the agenda is corporate services economic growth overview, basically forward programme and forward plan.
Just a note, Chair.
Yep, just a note, nothing new on there. Urgent business, if any, I'm not aware of any, so thank you very much for the meeting. Thank you.